Hi, this is Little Dwarf playing games while rambling incoherently into a microphone. Why? Well, just because I can. And I continue with Strangeland with the developer's commentary.
The dark thing. It destroyed Murmur.
The fool feels he'll live forever if the fight he faces not. But woes grow worse with age than all the spears that spared him.
Havamal, stanza 16. The suggestion is that the scribe is now wondering whether it is truly possible to avoid confronting one's problem, contrary to his earlier advice that some boils are better left unlanced.
Do you know how to kindle a spirit lamp?
I suppose you'd need spirits and a fire, huh?
Could you be a little more specific about how to kindle it?
I once read, a brand from a brand is kindled and burned, and fire from fire begotten.
Again from the Havamal.
For fire, you should seek 8-3. For spirits, this place is full of them.
What did you mean? This place is full of spirits.
You know what I meant. There's a shadow the dead leave behind. Words that echo in your ears. Phantoms that linger behind your eyes. And a weight of pain heaped up on your back. Even your voice has that stoop to it, stranger. A man can carry the dead, but their place is on the pyre. Do you understand? Once you have a flame, it will draw spirits from the dead as though they were moths.
Bread, please.
In Quest for Glory, so you want to be a hero, see Hero Quest. The rat Fenrus, familiar to the wizard Erasmus, begs, "Cheese, please."
Phone call.
It's big enough to squeeze through now.
Come see the lovely Teratoma. Watch her sway her shapely legs, stare into her shining eye, and touch her tender lips.
Who would want to shine a light on that? Not much of a crowd. What is this? These mouths keep opening and closing.
One of the greatest assets that we have as a team is Victor's absolutely amazing UI work and close-up work. And so if for no other reason, these kind of UI puzzles, tactile puzzles, would be worthwhile just to showcase that work. But beyond that, I think it really adds a lot to an adventure game to intersperse among the traditional inventory puzzles, these kind of tactile puzzles. They're much more common in games like Myst than they are in point-and-click adventures. But at least for me, they break up the flow and provide a different kind of gameplay that is consistent with normal point-and-click gameplay. So it's not like having a shooting sequence in the middle of an adventure game. Although I will note that with the shooting gallery, we do have a shooting sequence in the middle of our adventure game. But typically these are still puzzles that require figuring out the logic and interacting with hotspots. But they're a different kind of puzzle. It's a different kind of interaction, and it's immersive in a somewhat different way. And I think you simultaneously draw the player into the world more and give the player a little bit of a break from the other kind of puzzling. He comes back refreshed. And so, in that sense, I think they're really a good element. I think the adventure game Resonance, also published by Wagedai, has some of the best of these kinds of puzzles, period. Not just the best among Watched Eye's catalog, but the best of any adventure game. But generally, I think the things that make these kinds of puzzles fun, they shouldn't be too difficult. You don't want the player to get bogged down because unlike other kinds of adventure game puzzles, there isn't the same exploratory aspect. And so if the player spends too much time on them, they can lose interest. They should be visually interesting, and they should be just hard enough at least that the player gets a little bit of satisfaction. And finally, they should be quick. So Indiana Jones and the Fate of Atlantis, near the end of the game, has a UI puzzle involving turning wheels. And the only thing I can remember from it is that it was really slow, such that once you figured out what to do, it actually just took a long time to get the interface to go through the animations and get everything lined up. And I think that's a bad design. I think what you want with these is when the player has that flash of insight, he's able to pretty quickly achieve success. Because in general, I do view these as sort of, palate cleansers, amuse-bouches, not as the main course in an adventure game. When I was 10, my fourth grade substitute teacher decided on a lark to tell the class about the most disturbing parts of Stephen King's novel The Dark Half, and the one that disturbed me the most was the description of a kind of tumor that had inside of it, when you cut it open, teeth and hair and a primitive eyeball. And I was so disturbed by it that night, when my brother and I were doing a kind of freeform role-playing game, I incorporated it into the story and scared both of us so much that we couldn't stop playing the game until we had come to some resolution of what this obscene organ was and how it could be dealt with. Years later, while I was online trying to debunk various urban legends from my childhood, I looked up and discovered that actually this kind of tumor does exist. It's called a teratoma, and if anything, the description that my substitute teacher had given understates just how grotesque they can be, particularly a kind of in situ teratoma, where you can get actual organs forming. And the teeth aspect of it, they're teratomas that have had dozens and dozens of teeth inside them. So just imagine some huge lump inside your jaw that's just chock full of teeth, like a pomegranate is full of seeds. And when it came time to put something into Strangeland that really captured the visceral horror and, again, obscenity of cancer, it seemed obvious to me that we had to have some kind of teratoma. And obviously Vic took it and ran with it and gave it this gigantic form that I think captures that horror that I had as a child and hopefully shares it forward.
It gulped that meat right down. Bread, please.
Come see the lovely teratoma.
One more should do it. Oh, look at that. A large eye, ripe for the taking. I don't want to damage the eye. Lend me your eye?
friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears, Julius Caesar. Now, this is a bit like... This feels very pretentious to me. Like, just swapping a couple of words around and pretending... Well, I guess they're not pretending, but... And claiming you're getting inspired by Julius Caesar, by Shakespeare. Like, why does it even need to be a reference to something? That feels kind of weird to me, and I'm not entirely sort of a fan of this level of reference. And because I feel like the developers are sort of rubbing in my face how cultured they are, you know, how much they know about stuff, and they stuffed all of it into this game, even though it feels at points it didn't really need this kind of stuffing. So I don't know.
You might want this.
Do I? We shall see, eh? It's good to see through another's eye, though the world is still as it was.
The same point is made again later by the woman.
Thank you for that gift.
My wing.
Huh? I see you.
His last testament.
Last will. Master makers of jeweled toys, shape me and shine me into a sea prize, found by a boy's quick eyes in a glad surprise. Sea, sky and sand, let me one day a small child's happy summer memory. What? Again, what? Why does it even have to be a reference to anything, and what does it even have to do with this game in particular? Like, he just said testament. Last testament is literally just a common phrase, although I guess it's a bit of a tautology, because testament is always last by definition. But
I've got no use for them.
Like, I think this game goes a little bit overkill with trying to dazzle you with how high culture it is and how sort of referential it is.
I'm not holy enough for self-immolation.
I didn't want to do that. I wanted to use it on him.
No, no, no. Don't you see? At last, I was truly in the dark. A world without words, or memories, or visions, with nothing but the sound of doves' wings. Please, won't you let me go back?
The scribe's reaction, like that of most of the ghosts in Stranger's Summons, is akin to that of Samuel's shade when called forth from the Sheol by the now ludicrously named Witch of Endor, see 1 Samuel. And Samuel said to Saul, "Why hast thou disquieted me to bring me up?"
Rest in peace, old man. Rest in peace. It's dead.
The woman, the head, the rat, the
scribe. Death follows you like a shadow, doesn't it?
For the last time, I bid you stand aside. Behold the wings, fit for one who would soar and glide. My last, best work.
His fire has gone out. Goodbye. It worked. Here we go again. Time to walk, I guess. It's a long way down, but I've fallen farther. There are the tracks leading to the cage. It's just a matter of getting to them.
The Dark Crab boss fight is a complex pastiche of layers. The mandibles, the mouth, the arms, the eyes, the clouds, the platform, the feathers, the fog, the rain. It's a very significant part of the game, so making sure the effects are both visually pleasing but also useful to the player, because they're working as a timer of sorts, was quite tricky. Elaborating more on that, for example, when you blind the Dark Crab, his eyes become dark blue and slowly fade back to their normal color, indicating this won't be forever. Same for the acid that you pour on its arm. It starts out bright blue and slowly fades out to indicate the effect is wearing off. And of course, for the first time in the game, we implemented a dissolve visual effect when the crab dies. The dissolve sports a purple outline which matches the color theme of Strangeland. One of the moving parts is of course the rain and the puddles. The rain is dynamic. It starts slow outside the Dark Crab room and slowly intensifies as you start the fight. Puddles begin forming, puddles that reflect you and create ripples when you walk over them. Drips are created on objects that are affected by rain, and the raindrops increase in size, speed, and are affected by wind. Bluntly put, if only our characters felt alive and the background elements of a scene didn't adhere to that same value, then nothing would feel alive, in my honest opinion.
I'll need a little more elevation.
Oh, there was a second commentary that I didn't... It's a pity. I guess I can get myself killed.
What the hell happened?
I don't know that Strangeland has more symbols than Primordia did, but symbols play a different role in a game that doesn't purport to take place in a real world. Obviously, Primordia's world is make-believe, it isn't our real world, but the characters are supposed to be inhabiting an actual place, and there is a literal story that involves literally going from one part of that world to another and accomplishing things in it. Strangeland is a double make-believe world. There is some kind of outer make-believe world occupied by the widower, and then there is this inner make-believe world, which is his own imagination as he struggles with the grief over the loss of his wife. And in that world, it's really the symbols that are doing a lot of the storytelling. So whereas in Primordia, it wasn't essential that the player understand or recognize the symbols, it's fairly important in Strangeland that the player pick up on them. And it turns out to be very hard to hit the sweet spot between making a symbol insultingly obvious or heavy-handed on the one hand, and making it too obscure on the other. I certainly thought it didn't get more obvious than crabs inside someone's head, a giant crab as an enemy, people talking about onkos and masks, and fighting the crabs with chemicals and fire and scalpel. But it turns out that we just had to keep adding more and more of these cancer references to the game. I'm not sure that we did hit the sweet spot. We've sort of burned out of testers, so I can't get fresh perspectives to know whether now it's too laden with hints or still too obscure. But it's an interesting experience because obviously, as an author, the clues are always obvious to you because you're the ones who put them there. And it's interesting. You have these testers who are extremely smart, extremely careful players, very thoughtful people, and all these clues that you thought were so obvious are completely missed by them. So I hope that we hit the right balance here because, like I said, it is important for the player to pick up on them.
The Dark Crab boss fight.
Okay, I listened to this already.
It's pulling me in. What the hell is going on?
Don't tell me you're expecting a joke. Fine. Don't worry, it's all in your... Sometimes you fall behind, sometimes you get a... Wow, you're really in over your... You know, the thing is, it's never clear till the end whether something's a comedy or a tragedy.
One must wait until the evening to see how splendid the day was. One cannot judge until death. A quote variously attributed to Richard Nixon, Charles de Gaulle, Will Rogers and Sophocles. No doubt Churchill and Twain feel slighted. The quote seems to be a paraphrase of the closing lines of Oedipus Rex, themselves subject to many different translations. Robert Fagles renders them, "Now as we keep our watch and wait the final day, count no man happy till he dies, free of pain at last." But Sophocles himself seems to have borrowed the "count no man happy till he dies" line from Herodotus, who in turn attributes the line to Solon in his histories.
If the Reverend Doctor only brings the good word, Juliet wakes up in Romeo's arms.
In Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Friar John attempts to bring a message to Romeo in Mantua, informing Romeo of the plan to fake Juliet's death with a powerful sleeping potion. Due to the plague, John fails to deliver the message, and Romeo, unaware that Juliet's death is fake, kills himself. Juliet, discovering Romeo's dead body, does the same. The use of the Reverend Doctor for Friar John is inapt, but the clown's joke means to associate the play with the plight of the stranger and the woman. Had the doctors delivered word of a positive result from her cancer treatment, there would be no tragedy.
And if he doesn't, never was a story of more woe.
For never was a story of more woe than this of Juliet and her Romeo. Now, I have to, coming back for a moment to what the writer, I believe, the head guy, the head developer said about the clues regarding the cancer. Like, while I do agree that the giant black crab is a bit, ham-fisted, I have to also sort of confess that were it not for this, I'm not entirely sure I would have gotten it, because there was a lot that went over my head. Like, for example, I never made the connection with the fact that you found your wife's hair specifically because she has lost her hair as a result of chemo. And also, I never really thought about how you fought the crab with, chemicals representing chemo and fire representing, radiotherapy, and a giant knife representing a scalpel or a surgical intervention. So it was a little bit ham-fisted maybe, but to be honest, I feel like if you make it too obscure, if I wouldn't even get that, if I wouldn't even get that the story was about the woman dying from cancer and the guy being depressed about it, then I wouldn't get anything from the game. And I feel like that would alienate a lot of people to leave them feeling stupid. I definitely felt kinda stupid anyway after finishing the game, and I did get a little bit of it at least.
Yeah, I get the point. Way too big to be mine. It's an ad for Balm of Gilead. There's a photo of a mysteriously beautiful woman with the caption, "Is there?"
The narrator of Edgar Allan Poe's famous poem The Raven asks, Is there balm in Gilead? Tell me, I implore. Poe alludes to Jeremiah. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then is there no recovery for the health of the daughter of my people? The balm was some kind of medicinal perfume. Its exact composition is unknown. The expression took on a meaning of a cure-all for suffering.
Find out today at the shooting gallery. I warned you about the rides, didn't I?
A lot of our animations are really big in size, and unfortunately, AGS doesn't have the ability to stream textures. That means that every graphic gets loaded into memory when projected on your screen. Generally, that wouldn't pose a big problem, but when we're playing big full-screen close-ups, it causes the frame rate to drop. To work around those major slowdowns, we implemented a technique called precaching, where we project the graphic into a non-visible part of the screen so that it gets loaded into the memory. That explains the loading screen as you start the game, before the main menu. In some rooms throughout the game, we use the same technique to avoid stutters and frame drops.
Hey, over here! Dark and deep.
Stopping by woods on a snowy evening. The woods are lovely, dark and deep, but I have promises to keep and miles to go before I sleep. Again, what does it add to use two words and then claim you took them from a famous work of art? This feels incredibly pretentious to me, to the point where I'm actually kind of annoyed at this point. because it really feels at times that this game is like an ego trip for the developers, kind of.
Maybe I should just jump. It can't get any worse. It's a raven with a shrunken version of my head.
Actually, I will jump because...
Wait! Don't leave me here! Don't leave!
Okay, I guess I can't jump yet.
Gee, thanks. I hadn't noticed it was missing. Totally empty. It's like a cross between a croquet mallet, a shillelagh.
In Chapter 8 of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, Alice plays croquet, albeit with animals as mallets and bows, against the Queen of Hearts. A shillelagh is a wood Irish cudgel. I think it is a druid's staff or something. I seem to have a faint memory of it being connected to druids.
And a nightmare.
I guess if we're talking about the soundscape for Strangeland, we've got to talk about reverb at some point. You'll probably hear a lot of things pretty drenched in reverb, I guess you could say. I don't know, I like the effect. I've been kind of obsessed with vintage spring reverbs for a long time. I built my own reverb for a lot of the sound effects in Strangeland. It's just basically a wooden case with a great big fat steel spring in there. Like it's a mini slinky I used for it, actually. It just creates a really nice long trail reverb. So yeah, I used my own homebrew hardware reverb for a lot of the work, and there's also a couple of other vintage springs, but yeah, a lot of the reverb you'll hear there is the sound physically being passed through a spring in a box and then back into some audio inputs and then piped into that old computer for what we are hearing. I think there's also quite a few sound effects that I ran through a homemade plate reverb, which was the metal casing from an old VCR, which I just tore off the metal case and then strung it up on a frame. Attach your input and your output electret microphones or whatever. So I think there was a junkyard plate reverb used in a lot of those effects. There's long since been trashed for parts. But yeah, that was another fun part, is plugging in 47 different cables and jiggling wires to record one sound effect. Yeah. Actual hardware comes with a price, and that price is ease of use.
Adding the Mysteries of the Deep and the underworld area in the well turned out to take more than the couple weeks that we expected it would. It took some months. But after it was all made and integrated together, we really felt like now the game was ready. We were going to share it with a small group of testers who we thought were really thoughtful players. They had a lot of experience in adventure games. Some of them had been critical of Primordia. Some of them had been Primordia super fans. And, we felt that we were ready to share the game with them. So we did, and generally the reaction was pretty positive, though people felt that the game seemed a little bit small in that what we would now call Act 2, the part after you fall from the cage area the first time, felt a little bit confusing. And so this was now like nearing the end of 2018. And in January and February of 2019, I spent a lot of time really thinking about Act 2 and trying to figure out why it wasn't working. What was off here? And at the same time, Victor, who I think just has a tendency towards excessive growth no matter what, kept thinking we should add more areas to the game, add more rooms to the game, and I kept saying, I really don't see how we can do that. It feels like we've stretched the original conception as far as it could go. But, as we were examining it, there's several many-page long emails back and forth that we had, and we realized that there was a certain lack of direction in the second act. At that time, all you had to do in the second act was gather the torch, the poison, or the acid from the sea star, the honed dagger, and the wings. And once you had those, then you went up to the top, and that was sort of what led to the end game. And basically, the Valkyrie card just didn't show up until you had those items. So if you went back into that area after having ridden it up once, it wouldn't be there, and you were told by Murmur that you had to gather those items. That was the Murmur prophecy at the start of Act 2, before he's killed by the Dark Thing. And we really realized that that was why, it didn't feel directed. It didn't feel like there was a logical connection between the Valkyrie ride coming back and gathering those items. I don't really like puzzles where if you don't listen carefully to the dialogue, the puzzle makes no sense. I think Monkey Island 3 had a lot of those puzzles. I noticed when I was playing with my kids when they were little, some LucasArts games make perfect sense even if you skip the dialogue. I mean, within the realm of adventure game puzzles being a little bit wacky no matter what. But Monkey Island 3, you had to listen to the dialogue to have any idea what was going on with the puzzles. And that was sort of what Act 2 felt like. So what ensued was a months-long process to rip apart all of the Act 2 puzzles, rip apart the Act 2 scenes, the Act 2 dialogues, and fit them back together, arranged around this idea of gathering the spirits with the torch and using the spirits to cause the Valkyrie ride to operate again. And as we were thinking about these spirits, and Vic kept pushing for an expansion of the game, we realized it needed a third act. It would benefit from a third act. And we had the idea for Deadland, that, when you respawn, your head is always the last thing to spawn. And what if we had an area where you're in the land of the dead and your head doesn't respawn? And it's like a nightmarish version of the already nightmarish carnival. And so that, again, starting in about February 2019, we started implementing these ideas to rework Act 2 and create Act 3.
There's my head. It's stuck in some kind of glass box.
Thank God. You've got to get me out of here. We need to get back to her. We were so close. And then the Dark Thing did whatever it did. And ever since, I've just been stuck. Seriously, just smash the glass and help. I don't know how this happened. It feels like I've been in here a long time, but I can't remember how I got here. Was it you who put me here? No, I can't believe that. Listen, we need to reconnect. This situation, this separation, it isn't good for either of us. Mens sana and corpore sano and all that.
A healthy mind in a healthy body, the first in a list of desirable traits set forth by the Roman poet Juvenal in Satire 10. The next desirable trait which the stranger evidently lacks is a stout heart that has no fear of death.
Don't look at me. I'm stuck in a box. You need to walk around, see where we are.
The head literally cannot think outside the box.
Figure out how to get back to where we should be. Are you all right? Just take care of yourself. Ourself. Myself. It's time for you to get to work.
So as you'll see once you get into the Deadland area, and you can already see right now with the giant stranger head that has replaced the clown's head from Strangeland, the Deadland Carnival replaces all of the other characters with versions of the stranger. The ravens have the stranger's head. Murmur has become the stranger's head. The scribe is replaced with an old and senile version of the stranger, and so forth. And there are a few reasons for this. One is that the game is trying to convey a certain kind of alienation. And it's the alienation that comes from a quality called pareidolia. So pareidolia is this human trait that we see faces. It doesn't have to be faces, but faces are typically what it's talking about. We see faces in inanimate objects. If you look at a grounded plug outlet in a wall, you see two eyes and a mouth. You look at a crater on Mars and you see a face on the planet. You look at a shark that's upside down and it looks like a devil's face. There's this seemingly compulsive part of our brain, I think because facial recognition is so important to human evolution, the functioning of small groups of humans, that our brain is wired to see faces everywhere. But I want to talk about that in terms of alienation, because I think there is a quality where we sort of have a kind of pareidolia where when we look at people and see flaws in them, we see our own flaws in their flaws. That is, when we see someone who is behaving badly, it's very easy to recognize in ourselves those shortcomings. And sometimes it's just when we see someone suffering, we have this selfish tendency to not think of their suffering, but to think of how we may be suffering in the same way, or may in the past have suffered in that way. And rather than bringing us closer to ourselves, at least for me, there's a kind of alienating quality to that, where it's as if qualities that you think are unique to yourself, that define you, turn out to just be generic and scattered throughout the world. And that's part of what we're going for here, is this sense that everywhere the stranger looks, he sees himself in the most unflattering way, like carnival mirrors. And then a second part of it is to really make clear to the player a subtext from the earlier parts of the game, which is that each of these characters that you've met really is just another facet of the stranger, another way that the stranger is trying to externalize his feelings, to get away from his feelings, but also to explore them. And then the last reason for it is just I love the sequence in the movie Being John Malkovich, when Malkovich goes into his own head and inhabits briefly a nightmarish world where everyone he sees is Malkovich, has Malkovich's head. That sequence really stuck with me because of this quality of alienation and dislocation that it has in it, quality of estrangement, and of course the stranger needs to be estranged.
It's another raven that looks like me.
Now, when it came to doing the soundscape for Strangeland, I followed pretty much the same lines of thought I did with the artwork, which was develop like an underpainting, like a sound light motifs for several areas of the game. I think the Silent Hill music was a pretty big influence on me. Definitely a lot of my synth influences just that have always, been a part of what I kind of think of as the makeup of my work musically, like Brian Eno, Boren and the Club de Gore, LP. I mean, I could go rattling off producer names forever. Jeff Woodruff, or is it Jez Woodruff? Whoever did the soundtrack for one of the Elvira RPG games, the good version of that. But yeah, I really just wanted to build up kind of an underpainting for the music and the soundscape, and then I was able to layer on top of that and come back in and add some melodies where I thought they were appropriate, change up the atmosphere a little, like make things more tense or less tense where I wanted, and just generally like putting ornaments on a Christmas tree or something. I certainly didn't go into the soundscape just musical loop here, musical track here, and then later I'll add other tracks for other rooms. It was very much paint a larger picture of the soundscape for the whole game that was very, very kind of simplistic in a way, and then come in later and add the kind of flashes of color, sound color, if you will, later on. It's kind of hard to describe, but it's just a lot of layering, basically. Yeah.
Nothing but darkness down there.
Hey, careful!
Much better. What are you?
A man dreaming he's a bird? Or am I a bird dreaming he's a man?
A paraphrase of, I'm not even going to try to pronounce that, butterfly dream. How do I know whether I was a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man? Like many, I suspect my first exposure to this esoterica was via Chrono Trigger, in which the character Doreen in the Kingdom of Zeal quips, "Am I a butterfly dreaming I am a man, or a bowling ball dreaming I am a plate of sashimi? Never assume what you see or feel is real." Compare Edgar Allan Poe, A Dream Within a Dream. Is all that we see or seem but a dream within a dream?
Either way, I'm just a fragment of your imagination.
Don't you mean a figment of my imagination?
Partly.
What happened to this place?
Life has killed the dream you dreamed.
Yeah, he's quoting from the musical Les Miserables, a song that epitomizes the despair of a life that has gone awry, appropriate for the stranger's plight, though of course Fantine's predicament is far worse than his. Also, the Hollow Man, referenced throughout Strangeland, sets one of its stanzas, in Death's Dream Kingdom.
But don't worry, everything else here is dead too. That's why they call it Deadland.
I was flying to a woman and then a crab grabbed me. And somehow, when it was all over, I wound up here. How can I get back to her?
I heard a joke once. I think the punchline is, carry on.
This is one of the clown's jokes. The hint is to just continue onward.
Can't you help me get back to her?
I can't even help you get back to you.
Deadland? Am I?
A headless man walks in a world of ghosts and he wonders, am I a dead man dreaming he's alive? Or a live man dreaming he's dead?
Another paraphrase of the butterfly dream. How do I not know whether I was then a man dreaming I was a butterfly, or whether I am now a butterfly dreaming I am a man?
Goodbye,
fare far, if that's your fate.
Did you miss me? Sadly, we're stuck together, like a canker in a rose. Et in purgatorio ego.
Et in Arcadia ego is a Latin phrase literally meaning I too am in Arcadia, was a memento mori used in art to mean that death is present even in a pastoral utopia, i.e. Arcadia. Here the pun is that the stranger's nagging conscience, or superego, will continue to haunt him even in this purgatory, or perhaps limbo, in which the stranger now finds himself.
Trust me, my lot's much worse than yours. To be stuck at your stumbling pace, sharing in your shame, unable to abide or abort, to forgive or forget. Familiarity, my fool, doth breed contempt.
Here goes nothing. You?
Yes, me. Now listen. In the world of entomology, an imago is an insect in its final mature state, typically winged. In the world of psychotherapy, however, an imago is an idealized mental image of another person, wielding great power over the psyche.
Carl Jung coined the term imago, but the definition offered here owes more to Susan Isaacs, the nature and function of fantasy. Jacques Lacan associated the term with the mirror stage of psychological development, when the infant identifies an I. The metaphor of mirrors, and fragmented mirrors specifically, is taken up later in Strangeland.
Power to unify the fragmented body, Lacan writes. In Latin, of course, the word means image, or echo, or phantom.
When asked about spirits, the scribe hints at the usage of imago, speaking of words that echo in your ears and phantoms that linger behind your eyes.
What are you talking about?
Whichever it was that you sought in the pit, the last stage of growth, the idealized person of another, or a ghost in the dark, I advise you to look up, not down in your search. You can fall to your end, but not to a proper ending.
Wait. What does it all mean?
Brother, we cicadas crawl through the dark earth for 6,000 days.
The periodical cicadas, technically called magicicadas, surely the closest we get to a real-life Pokemon, live underground in their nymphal stage for 13 or 17 years before emerging and metamorphosing into their adult imago stage. 17 years work out to 6,205 days.
Just to fly for a few brief weeks of light and love. You ask me what it means. I tell you, do not waste your wings, and do not spurn the mana you are given.
The mana from the havens on which the Israelites fed during their 40 years of wandering is considered by some to have been a kind of honeydew secretion from insects. The Israelites complained that the mana compared unfavorably to the food they had while slaves in Egypt. This is one of the several Exodus references in Strangeland, the most obvious being the motif of a stranger in a strange land.
The cicada spit up some kind of gooey pulp.
Okay, now I need to heal myself to get the The rocks?
I guess that's what passes for an anvil here. And I thought he looked bad when his fire went out. Is anyone there? 8-3?
Atri, that is my name. Why have you called me?
You said your name was Atri, but in another place. I think I knew you as 8-3.
Atri died, so that 8-3 might live. So, there he was, and here I am.
So you two are the same person?
How many lives, how many selves have you scattered across this place and the other one? You should know by now that every man contains a multitude.
Song of myself, I am large, I contain multitudes. Atri is also more directly referring to the fact that the stranger is encountering multiple versions of himself inside his own head.
And life is a process of elimination.
So Atri was eliminated?
In time, a man's name becomes the sum of his shames. It turns poisonous.
The name Atri is almost certainly derived from Atr, a Norse word that means snake venom or poison.
It shrinks him and sickens him until he thinks the whole world is made of poison.
Interestingly, the word Atr was used in Norse mythology to mean not only poison or venom, but also the primordial stuff from which the cosmos came into existence.
And then he thinks, better to come of age again, to be a number, the sum of primes.
The number 83 is a sum of consecutive primes. Atri is suggesting that his transformation into 8-3 involved eliminating all but some irreducible elements of himself. The number 83 is also what is considered a safe prime, meaning that it can only be reached by doubling another prime, 41, and adding 1 to that amount.
Highly cototient.
Further emphasis on the number 83's relationship with primes, together alluding lightly to Primordia's primer character and his own fixation.
Yes, there's safety in numbers, and so poisonous Atri is left behind, and industrious 8-3 soldiers on.
You were one of the ones who did whatever it was you did to Nineveh, aren't you?
And you're one of the ones who blames the doctor for the sickness he couldn't stop. So here in your head, you've painted me a poisoner, and a freak, and a dwarf, and a number. So, which of us makes monsters?
What the hell do you mean, I make monsters?
I am but a walking shadow.
Macbeth, life is but a walking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Atri is also suggesting that he, like many other characters in the Stranger has encountered, is just a shadow version of the Stranger himself, since they are all products of Stranger's imagination.
This is your game to play. You picked the pieces, laid the board, and made the rules.
What did you mean when you said, here in my head?
You walked through your mouth to get here. Where else did you think we were?
I thought we were in Deadland.
Where could the land of the dead be, other than our memories?
In another place, you, or 8-3, made things for me. Can you do that for me here?
With what? I have nothing but my own burning shame. And even here, no work is done without an order.
Goodbye.
A funny phrase, you know. Once, it meant God be with you. Does that really seem a fitting farewell in this pit?
Can you use this?
As for the actual creation of the soundscape, soundtrack for Strangeland, I'm basically obsessed with vintage musical hardware from the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Although for Strangeland, I really tried to keep it to like actual hardware that was used to make computer game soundtracks of the time in the early to mid 90s. Systems like the MT32, Akai samplers, drum machines. But I do a lot of circuit bending, which for those of you who don't know what it is, it's basically opening up the guts of a keyboard, like a musical instrument, like a drum machine or a keyboard, and then crossing wires on chips and circuit boards until the sound gets twisted up in a way that's was never intended to make this sound, and yet you can kind of strangle new sounds out of old hardware. Even like the perfect place to start is like little kids' keyboards. You know, $10, cross some wires, and all of a sudden the cat noises sound like a dying cat, or the cello sounds like a dark reverberating cello. It's really interesting what you can do with circuit bending. For anyone that's into music, check it out. But yeah, generally used a lot of real hardware from the era. I don't have an MT32 per se specifically. I've been meaning to get my hands on one of those, but there's a lot of HR16 in there. There's a lot of like vintage monosynths and polysynths. I think I used an Akai AX80 with beautiful VFD displays for a lot of the poly analog sounds, and Acetone PS1000 for a lot of the monosynth stuff. Sampler-wise, I used a Roland MKS sampler, like a really old-school sampler, to chop. I found that was really useful to chop a lot of the samples up, like the DT, the Dark Thing screeches you'll hear are often animal sounds that have been circuit bent, but then run through a sampler and have the sample chopped, and I'm like playing with the sample dial, the Q dial wheel on the MKS sampler as the sample's playing, and just generally having a lot of fun crunching and gritting up these real sounds. I mean, I run everything through a DAW, like I run Reason to record all my hardware, but generally 80-90% of what you're hearing on Strangeland is coming from actual keyboards and actual era-specific machinery, which is a little thing I thought was cool, and yeah, hope some other synth heads pick up on some of those sounds too. And if you're not a synth head, I just hope you like how it sounds.
Okay, so I feel like this episode has been long enough, so I'm going to save and end it for now. That's all for this one, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!